Yes, yes. Welcome to the ancient world of tabletop games. I am Agamemnon from the historical documentary Time Bandits. This is a report from a fugitive. I've introduced people to the role-playing game hobby and to board gaming by handing them dice. If you are farm fresh to these hobbies, technically you won't need dice. Dice are provided. Spare dice. We all have spare dice and dice to spare. Beyond the spare dice we lend out for a quick game of something or other, the role-playing game set in the fabulous world of whatever it is. On-the-spot dice lending sees you through. Soon you'll embark upon a mighty quest across stunning vistas and over uncharted lands in search of your own dice. And those dice, whether you go looking for them or they come rumbling across the online shopping world to land at your door, those dice will never be enough. Technically, you'll need all the dice in the world and more dice imported from Mars. What sort of dice do you need to take part in a role-playing game? It's a trick question with many answers. First, no dice at all for a diceless system that uses playing cards or even coins. In an RPG, your character faces many tests. Do you split the arrow at the center of the target at that crucial archery contest? Roll dice and check results against your character's archery score. This is a yes-no test. You did it or you didn't. The answer is easily provided using coins, playing cards, or dice. In a game with a system of rules, the rules will let you know whether or not dice are used. Most RPGs use dice, so this video won't concern itself with cards or coins. How many dice do you need? Ask yourself how many different games you feel like playing. If you tried Dungeons & Dragons at the very start of the hobby as a playtester, before the game went on sale, there were no strangely shaped mass-produced dice as there are now. That side industry for gamers simply didn't exist. Probability was parcelled out in chunks of 5%, and the only random number generator that could handle the task was a hat or a bowl that you dropped 20 numbered bottle caps into, or cardboard squares or pieces of paper if you didn't have a hoard of bottles. That basic lottery system gave gaming the 20-sider before the routine adoption of the 20-sided die. Drawing numbered tokens from a hat or a bag or a plastic tub was the normal method of determining if your arrow hit or missed that target during the crucial competition. The alternative was to use charts and tables geared to the readily available 6-sider, with unsavory chunks of probability welded to your game system. At the start of the RPG hobby, there were a lot of firsts. First, find a science-based company that's putting out strange educational shapes and then adopt those curious shapes. Today, your standard polyhedral dice set is pretty much known as a D&D set. It wasn't always so. Gygax and company set their numbered tokens and bottle tops aside and seized on this crazy idea. Use bizarre-looking dice. Having 20 sides helped with parceling probability into 5% chunks. This business of looking into the fossil record isn't easy. Some of my dice fell by the wayside, but I'll do my best to recount how I ended up with a small mountain of dice. My introduction to the hobby was a question. Do you know what D&D is? Yes. By arcane means and much searching in the records of Middle-earth, beneath a wizard's hat and with coffee to hand, somehow, without ever having held a rulebook in my magician's mitts, I knew what D&D was. And so I was invited to play in a knockoff game that was deliberately set up to bypass the need for D&D's strangely shaped dice. That game is Tunnels and Trolls. The people behind the rip-off felt access to bizarre dice was somehow off-putting rather than an added attraction, and so the game developed around standard 6-sided dice. I scrabbled around and unearthed D6. By that point I'd read the rulebook. Once you're absorbed into the hobby, terminology rears before you and 3 6-siders become 3d6. There's no going back. Here are my original dice for use in T&T. I had 3d6 for rolling up a character, 6d6 in case I had to roll weapon damage or other things, and 2d6 to make saving rolls. Dexterity to leap over a collapsing floor, or strength to bash in a door, for example. So, Even for my first game, I'd somehow created a complete dice kit for use in an adventure from character creation all the way through to character demise if my dice failed me. I have very few wooden dice. They're okay for the occasional board game, but you want a touch more weight in your dice to stop them from scrambling the results at the first sign of a stiff breeze. The dice with large red indents for the number 1, no, I would never describe those as balanced. I soon moved on from those, though I clawed them out of the dusty archive for this video. The saving roll dice matched another player's dice on the day. My response was to paint in the 1s, to differentiate them from the far better rolling dice of that other player. This avoided accusations of dice rustling, switching my lamentable dice for the superior ones. We didn't use dice towers or dice trays and let our dice roam free across the black-felt plains of the tableland. Our dice settled where all could see them, and we'd leave them there unless called on to roll them again. That led to the phenomenon of herding your dice back into your waiting arms and stashing them in bags, boxes, or small tins. I'd come away from these sessions with strays folded into my herd. Now, I'm not saying a certain player was responsible for those strays, but I am saying that. One game in, and I went from a dedicated dice set to a customized set. You make your dice your own. These are the first dice I rolled in a fantasy game setting, and that was for use in a fighting fantasy game book. Though not strictly a role-playing game, the book series borrowed everything from role-playing games, bar the player interaction and complete freedom of gaming choices, all founded on rolling 2d6. Several game systems along, and I ended up playing D&D with a borrowed 20-sider. My own gaming equipment at that time: a pencil, blank paper, 6-sided dice. With more D&D on the horizon, it was time to go looking for a polyhedral dice set of my own, and this is, more or less, that set. No one had black dice, and those seemed a safe bet. I already had a black D6, and for reasons unknown, the black D6 kept changing down the centuries. Here's the latest fixture. This is not a tale of online purchase, no. We visited the wizard who ran a game shop that pretended it was a model shop, or it was a model shop that pretended it was a game shop. By this time, I'd accidentally introduced people to the hobby, and I was part of 2 gaming groups. A player from the first group was about to press gang us into joining a wargaming club and turning it into more of a role-playing club. That meant I was exposed to 3 gaming groups, all with varying levels of equipment. The trip to the Wizard's Emporium was made with a group who had nothing. We were going to look at figures and paints and brushes for those figures, and maybe spy out a few games and accessories. As we stumbled over more game systems with different rules and new approaches to using dice, we needed polyhedral dice sets. But there weren't any. The dice were all loose, and I felt as though we eyed jewels or individual pick-and-mix suites in a shop that coincidentally sold dice. I didn't need to buy a black D6. The rest I went after methodically. D4, D8, D10, the unloved D12, and a D20. With hardly any D&D under my belt, I'd already learned that the D12 didn't get much love. Around the gaming table, I also saw that it was handy to have a second 4-sider. For contrast, I added the bright yellow D4, and that was that. I could play all sorts of systems without having to borrow dice. Did I play D&D? Yes. I'll return to this quite often, I'm sure. Playing D&D didn't make me a D&D player. 5 or 6 game systems in, I finally played the world's first commercially available RPG. I was a role player, willing to try any system or setting that sounded half decent. Yes, people play D&D and only D&D. Nothing wrong in that. It seemed natural to us to seek out variety. The more games you play, the more dice you need. It's one of Newton's laws of game physics, in the secret appendix of the Player's Handbook, accessed via the switch hidden inside a bust of Master William Shakespeare. That's not a role-playing fact, it's a Batman one. After buying dice from a shop, as though they were sweets, creating my own polyhedral dice set, I only bought dice from a physical shop one more time, for games themselves injected dice into the collection. These retired dice came with a game, obliterating the need for tunnels and trolls. With a rise in boxed RPG systems and the dice to play them, game systems freed themselves from the Earth's pool and catapulted playability on day one clear into the cosmos. Buy the game, open the box, roll the dice. These are made of cheap plastic that crumbled and flaked easily, and I've retired them to the dusty archive. I was never satisfied with the idea of adding wax to dice as here, and I also retired the percentile dice that came with them. Those were two 20-siders that called for waxing or inking in two colours, 1 to 10 twice over, to function halfway properly. D&D's original D20s were 1 to 10 twice, and I'd encounter those models repeatedly in my gaming travels. Instead of sticking with them, I sought out new percentile dice in the form of 2D10 pairs. Without a dedicated tens die as industry standard, we chose a high colour and declared it before rolling: green high, red high, and for consistency, red high again. 96. Typical. A D1000, used in only one game system I can think of, meant rolling something easy enough to remember. Red, white and blue in order of importance, or whatever you had to hand that made sense. 791. Sounds like a good roll, believe it or not. With those percentile dice pairs bought in a shop, I never used a physical shop again. Games by mail order provided more dice. These very dark blue D6 started out rough. That crack in the D6 was a manufacturing defect and not through regular wear and tear. With plenty of D6 at my disposal, I wasn't for returning the game. These sets were part of an offer. I never received my dice and complained, and never received my dice. One eternity later, in 2 short bursts, I received 2 sets without explanation. It seemed churlish to return the bonus set. That would only have confused an already overloaded system. Why do you need at least 2 polyhedral sets? You might have to roll multiple D8, and it's quicker to roll a bunch of dice once than to roll a single die, record the result, and roll the same die again. Percentile dice are better as tens and units pairings. At a pinch, use 2D10. Avoid rolling D20 as D100. And swerve D20 numbered 1 to 10 twice over, even if one batch of 10 carries a plus sign to indicate the higher values of 11 to 20. Dice maintenance? Your dice will last years. I should take ink to some of these worn-out numbers. As for worn-out dice, players believe dice wear out after rolling badly once. Those dice are temporarily retired, and the second polyhedral set is brought on as a matter of role-playing law. The code demands this. It's a code made up of superstitious beliefs. Mock those beliefs at your peril. Beware transmutation into toads. Keep using dice until they fall apart, and then truly retire them to that nice farm in the countryside where they'll gamble instead of gamble, and savour the last days of summer like a fine meal before sunset. With more games came more dice in dribs and drabs, and then I started this channel and knew I had to buy dice for use as props. Otherwise, I'd have no use for a giant D20. I've now introduced people to the hobby across the water by purchasing dice for international players. Soon enough, I realised I'd reuse a game like Pandemic Legacy by purchasing dice to replace stickers. Discussing RPG starter sets and beginner boxes led more dice to my door. The trend is to have one of each die in a polyhedral set, plus duplicates where necessary. A basic set is 1d4, 4d6, 1d8, percentile dice in tens and units, the rarely rolled d12, and 2d20 for purposes of D&D. If you can't be bothered simulating 1d3 dividing a d6 by 2, purchase dedicated 3-siders instead. I recommend plastic dice over wooden, metal or stone variations, and opaque dice as opposed to see-through ones. Dice towers and dice trays eliminate much faffing around when it comes to rolling your polyhedral random number generators. How many dice do you need to participate in a role-playing game? A few, and those are borrowed at first. After that, if gaming hooks you, you'll always need more dice than you'll need, and that really is a role-playing fact.